policies are driven by information that is managed, that is packaged. And as we look within the humanitarian and development community, there are benchmarks, indicators that will either reference that we are in an emergency mode, or somehow or another we are on the road to recovery and development. Do you find that the characterization, perhaps, of a situation, whether it is emergency or development, useful? Do you find that some of the benchmarks and indicators perhaps perpetuate certain programs, as you've noted earlier, to stay within an emergency rather than look towards development and transition?
Let me start by agreeing with you that fundamental to correct decision making is correct information. We have in this sub-region, like in all other developing or underdeveloped regions, a problem with information. We do not have enough of it. That is a problem at a level of its own. It's just not enough information. But then the quality of information becomes the next most important thing. And the quality here has got several dimensions, of which the most important in terms of influencing policy or the actions that governments are taking or failing to take is the fact that a large industry of information which is self-serving has grown up. As the aid industry has grown, so has its capacity to collect information which favors yet more emergency response. There are NGOs collecting information which serves their interests. There are other bodies, including UN-affiliated bodies, which are very much in the food aid industry, which are collecting information which is out of context and does not give the impression to those who have to make the decisions that they've got any option except to respond in this knee-jerk fashion. So it's inadequacy, but also information being out of context, getting the countries to feel that they have no option but to respond in an emergency fashion. The countries themselves are not investing enough of their own, what you could call, independent information that can guide correct policy making. Nor are they investing in what yesterday I called a correct home for information, where all these strands of feedback from the real economy and the real society can be looked at in context and to say, we've got this, that, that. What does it say for a response that can enable us to not only respond to the immediate need, but also to enable the country to stand on its own feet. And to even, in Ethiopia, we have a country which, despite the images that everyone sees on television, a country that can become an agricultural superpower on the sub-regional scale. There's enough well-watered land, even without irrigation in this country, to not just feed this country, but to export. But you have production of cereals, which is somewhere between 0.7 tons per hectare to about 2 tons per hectare. The developing country average is 3.5. So even compared to other developing countries, we're way back. If we solve that problem alone, and we don't even need rocket science for it, this country would become a major exporter. But it takes commitment to doing it and belief that it can be done. At the moment, that belief is lacking. And the commitment is lacking. And I suspect partly because it is far too easy to be helped from outside. And the country has gone lax. And the sub-region has gone relaxed. It accepts people will always come when we cry that we're hungry.
Staying in Ethiopia here, where what you have laid out here is a need to invest in the basic infrastructure and the foundation to move from traditional emergency relief programs to a development framework. And yet, in order to make the proper investment, as defined as how we have reached benchmarks in the emergency, there needs to be an evidence-based process with regard to these sorts of transition, early recovery funding. What system do we have in place? What information, what benchmarks has the international community developed in order for donors, in order for partners to be able to make this long-term commitment and to be able to be transparent and to be held against some of these benchmarks with regard to transition?
The government of Ethiopia, like any other government, has got a core statistical capacity. It's got a whole department in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development called the Central Statistical Agency, which collects information on all sectors, including agriculture, including food insecurity, etc., etc. It's a poor country, and therefore the capacity of that institution is limited. The international community has developed a vast amount of information collection activity. And the capacity for that information collection is in direct proportion to the amount of budgets that they tend to spend, which then each institution wishes to defend through collecting information that buttresses the impression that its work is important. NGOs are collecting information. The donor community, including the United States through the FuseNet program, are collecting information on food security, on food insecurity, on all kinds of aspects of the food situation, as well as agricultural potential. We in FAO are collecting information every year jointly with WFP in this case, on what do we expect to be the harvest next year. And in the past 2 years we've been doing a methodology change because this information was not correct. The assessment of land area was wrong. It was driven by the motivation of government staff in the field to show that they are going to make big successes in the next year. We have corrected that. So we are trying to correct, but at the same time, the power of the budgets drives the kind of information that is being collected at the moment. Secondly, the information tends to go out through the media, through appeals for aid, and through all kinds of channels which do not allow a sifting of this information and saying what is gossip and what is real information, and what should the government be basing decision making on. Third, the government and the donors do not have a forum where they systematically and professionally screen through information that looks at more than just the aid or the appeal for food, etc., etc. So the information is coming to specific parts of the government which are themselves already committed to giving food aid or doing this or doing that. There's no structure in place to handle information in a rational manner. I was saying yesterday that if we do not correct this question of the correct market for information, we can improve the quality, but we will not be able to improve the decision making and commitment to action that we need to achieve.